Have you been treating your blog categories kind of like an afterthought? You just kind of, when you write a post, you just kind of think, oh, well, that might be where it fits the best. And then even over time, you might end up with just so many categories that you kind of lose track of what's going on. Right now, I want to talk to you about a more strategic way to handle your blog categories. This is something that I am now putting together internally here at the Blog Marketing Academy. Hello there, David Risley here with blogmarketingacademy.com. Now, let's talk blogging. Let's talk about turning your blog into an actual content marketing machine. In order to do that, you need to put a structure in place. And it really can become a thing when you have been blogging for as long as I have. Now, it's one of those things that even though sometimes I know the best practices and I may have done them before in the past, you end up getting a little bit lazy. And so right now I am in the middle of a big content audit, okay? And in fact, me creating this very video is part of that content audit, because what's going on is that the actual post that, if you're on the site right now, that's below this, was originally written maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And I brought it up to date. Okay, that's part of the content audit. We're also redefining the structure of the site in order to optimize it for search. Which brings us to the categories, okay? Because basically what I'm talking about in this post, I am now approaching in a fresh 2021, 22 perspective, and kind of reorienting this very structure of the Blog Marketing Academy, and that brings me to the category structure. Now, the category structure of most sites ends up becoming more of an afterthought, and it ends up being treated like a bunch of little digital filing cabinets, okay? And what can happen over time is that you end up with this really long list of fairly useless categories. And some people, they display those categories in their sidebar using the widget or what have you, but generally speaking, those categories are just not really very usable. They end up being just a bunch of nouns, and the truth is, a lot of people don't really navigate that way. And so what I originally discussed in the blog post was the idea of reorienting these categories around the benefits that our target markets are looking for. And so if we know what our target market is looking for, we actually literally name and structure these categories around what they're looking for so that we can optimize accordingly. And then we display those categories out in the open in a way so that when our target market arrives on our site, they immediately see that this is a site that is going to benefit me, that is going to help get me closer to where I want to go. And that's because the categories are actually named in a benefit-driven way. Okay, so that's the big picture, but then it also comes down into mapping these categories out into the content marketing funnels through the lead magnets into your sales funnels and stuff like that. And so the whole thing becomes this content assembly line with your content at the top of the funnel, and it's bringing people into segmentation on the email list through the lead magnets and ultimately in your funnels, and you can get some conversions this way. And then the SEO perspective of this is that we're going to be then orienting these things into content silos, putting an internal linking structure in place, and the pillar post right up there at the first level. So what I want to do as part of this content audit, I'm actually doing a whole internal case study for pro members here at the Blog Marketing Academy. And so pro members are able to follow along with me as I'm actually doing this content audit, and I'm using the time that I'm spending doing this internal project for myself to then create some training, and you guys can just literally watch over my shoulder as I optimize and structure the Blog Marketing Academy itself to be better in Google search, okay? What I want to do, because I've already discussed a little bit about the blog categories, is I'm going to take an aspect of that training that I've done so far, and I'm simply going to show it to you, because that way I don't have to repeat myself, all right? So what follows here is actually part of the traffic course inside the pro member section of the Blog Marketing Academy, and I will see you on the other side of that recording. Okay, so before we start just launching into creating a bunch of changes and doing an audit on the site and that type of thing, we need to step back and we need to look at the big picture of how exactly we want the blog to be structured to begin with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off here with some basic theory as to how to set up the blog categories and the overall structure of your content in order to ultimately funnel people into your email list and generate sales, because that's kind of the entire point of what we're doing. So I put together this basic diagram here, and so basically at the top level you could think of these as your categories. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about how to define these categories. One of the big mistakes that people make with their blog, and I can admit that I've gotten a little out of hand with mine, so this is one of the things that I'm going to be fixing as part of my own content audit, but is having too many categories and having the categories be super generic to the point where they're not really useful. As I'm going to talk about coming up, we want to limit the number of categories that we're using, and we also want to name the categories in such a way where each one matches up with one of the core desires of your market, so that you know one of the things that they want, one of the things that they really focus on. And not only that, we want to keyword target these things so that because these landing pages that we're going to create for these categories, we are going to definitely keyword optimize. Now, these landing pages that we're going to create for these categories are going to have a bunch of posts shown under there, but we're going to definitely treat this differently than what most blogs do, because most blogs, they just kind of create a little digital filing cabinet and then they just start displaying posts underneath that. We're going to go the extra mile here. We're actually going to turn these things into SEO targeted landing pages that can build our list, funnel people to the right stuff, that type of thing. Now at the secondary level here, the little blue icons, these are for pillar posts, or what I've called Redwood posts. These are going to be the big guys. Like, these are going to be your master posts, your big articles for each of these categories. And I do think that we should target having at least one solid Redwood post for each major category of your site. Now, you can have more than one, and that's okay, but we're going to target having at least one. And so I know that, at least in my content audit, I've got some categories that are missing one. I haven't been strategic enough about going and creating Redwood posts for each of the major things. And so that's one of the things that I'm going to be doing. And then underneath that, we of course have all the other articles, okay, and that are going to be filed underneath each of these categories. So what we're going to have here is we're going to turn each of these into little content silos. Each one is going to be like a vertical silo that's going to be aligned around a particular category. And that category is going to have a landing page to form the central hub of that content silo. It's going to have one or more major pillar posts that are going to be listed right at the very top of it. Okay, and then it's also going to have a standard display of articles that go underneath that category. And each one of these are going to be content silos centered around a particular keyword for search purposes, but also one of the major things that my market wants. Now, if we break this down just a little bit more, what we're shooting for here is that each of these categories, we're going to have a full-on SEO optimized landing page that it's going to form the hub of this content silo, okay? Then each category is going to have at least one pillar post, or I often call this a Redwood post. Now, I've got content here on the site about the Redwood strategy, and it's essentially the idea of having a really fully formed guide or major pillar article that you're going to circle back and you're going to be updating on a routine basis. And I use the analogy of the large redwood trees out in California that have gotten super large, and they're like some of the biggest trees on the planet, but they obviously didn't start that way. Like most trees, there's rings, and it's because they're just growing over time until it becomes that massive thing. That's what we're going to be doing with these pillar posts. We're going to be going back and we're going to updating them, and these are going to be like the central article hub, so to speak, of each of these content silos. And then, again, we've got those individual posts that are going to be filed beneath that category. And each of those posts are going to be including backlinks not only to each other, the other things within that content silo, but we're going to be feeding backlinks up to the pillar post. We want to have a lot of backlinks up to that pillar post, and then ultimately up to the central hub, which is going to be the category landing page. Okay. Now, from a marketing perspective, we also want to have each of these content silos be matched up with a lead magnet, ideally, so that we can use various systems behind the scenes to manage our calls to actions. But essentially, when somebody is on one of these articles or on the pillar post or on our category homepage, we can funnel them into a particular lead magnet and get them onto our list, and we can segment them properly and those types of things. So in an ideal world, you would actually have a pretty good solid lead magnet that will fit each of your major content silos on your site, okay? And then taken to the next level, the final level really, would be if you can make each of those content silos funnel into an actual sales funnel, have some type of a sales back in there, map these content silos to one or more products that you have and that you offer that would be relevant to the people who are interested in the topic of those content silos. Okay, so one of the things that I'm going to be doing here is that I'm going to be forming this structure. And at the final basis, we're going to have lead magnets for a lot of these content silos, okay? And then I'm going to also be matching up each of these silos with courses from the course library here at the Blog Marketing Academy so that I can actually match courses and other things from the member side of the Blog Marketing Academy with the actual content, okay? But I'm going to be structuring the whole thing into this content silo structure. Now, if you're much earlier on in your content game, okay, it's a little easier to get this stuff set up correctly from the get-go, all right? And I would encourage you to do so. Even if you don't have everything in place, maybe you want to sit down and you want to outline the overall game plan and maybe come up with some potential lead magnets for each of your major content silos and stuff like that. Keep in mind that you really don't want to have that many. I think I'm probably going to end up in the neighborhood of maybe 6 to 8 categories, and I'm going to be structuring content silos around that. Now, it is possible that when it comes to a category structure, we may get into some subcategories, and so you can create content silos around a subcategory as well, and still have some backlink structure that goes up further in the silo up to the main root category. And so you could do that, but trying to get too involved with it. When it comes to more fine-tuned grouping of content, that's what we can use the tag structure for of WordPress. The categories are going to be more the front-facing stuff, and we want to think in terms of SEO and the major desires of our market when it comes to our categories. When it comes to the tags, that's more for internal purposes, and you can get a lot more granular with that. We'll talk about that coming up here, but that's how to think about it. Now, if you have a bunch of content like I do, and I'm going to be doing the audit here at the Blog Marketing Academy, then you've got a little bit of extra work because you need to go in there and you need to redefine your category structure. And then there's a good chance that you're going to have a bunch of categories that now need to be remapped. And so one of the things that I'm going to be having to do here is I'm going to have to recategorize a lot of my blog posts and start to regroup them and things like that, and start to fill in the gaps, because some of these content silos that I'll create don't have a good solid corresponding Redwood pillar post to go with it. And so that's something I'm going to have to put onto my content plan to create that thing and start filling in some of the gaps in the overall content footprint, so to speak, that's going to be presented to Google here. So that's the big overriding plan, and we will get into some more details coming up. Okay, and we're back. So Hopefully that was helpful to you in terms of putting that category structure together for your site in a more strategic way. And I encourage you to put a little bit of advanced thought into this. Don't be reactive. Don't shoot from the hip, and be creating categories on your site as you go. Like when you write something and it doesn't quite fit into one, and then you just kind of create a new one. Don't do that. You want to spend a little bit of time and create a category tree that makes sense for your market and your niche and your audience. You want to try to keep that category tree fairly simple. I try to keep it to 5 or 6 categories tops, but if you need to get into some subcategories, it's okay. Just try not to get too big with it, because that means you're probably covering too much ground. You might have gone a little broad and overdid it a little bit. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. And remember, these need to be front-facing categories that when your market sees them, when they come to your blog, you can present those categories and it will immediately click on them within like 1 or 2 seconds that your site is right up their alley, that you actually deliver benefits that they are looking for. That's what you want the categories and the names of those categories to actually say to your readers. And then when they click on one, you're going to be actually bringing them down a funnel, which will ultimately get them onto your list, segmented under that interest, and ultimately into the appropriate sales funnel. Now, of course, the way we're structuring this in a silo format is all about presenting that clean footprint to Google, so Google clearly knows what it is that you talk about. And we've got that nice linking structure among the bottom part of the post, like the secondary level post, leading up to the first level of post, which would be your pillar post, what I call the Redwood strategy, and then ultimately up to your actual category silo landing pages, usually via breadcrumb links that you might put at the top of the article. Okay, so that's the big picture. If you've got any questions at all, definitely let me know in the comments below, and I'll try to get back to you just as soon as I can. And of course, if you're not already a pro member, you may want to consider becoming one. The lifetime membership, as of this recording, is currently available, which means you won't have any recurring payments whatsoever. But one of the benefits that you're going to get as a pro member is that you can follow along on this audit and all the training that I'm doing along the way, because the whole point is to essentially tackle the subject of getting more organic traffic, okay? And I'm literally using the Blog Marketing Academy itself as my own case study, kind of coming in there as a little bit of a veteran who got a little lazy over the years, and I'm now coming in and just like really cleaning up the footprint of Google. And so now you'll be able to watch over my shoulder as I do that. But you need to be a pro member to follow through with those videos, and you can learn more about that if you go to blogmarketingacademy.com. See you later.